A quirky apartment in Los Angeles, a broken-hearted teacher, and a group of strangers who somehow became family. But behind the laughs, the awkward silences, and that unforgettable chemistry, the real lives of the New Girl cast were far more complicated than we ever imagined. Some of them rose to heights they never thought possible. Some quietly battled doubts and setbacks behind the scenes, and others faced moments that could have changed everything, forever. Before we dive in, I want to ask you something. Who was your favorite roommate in that iconic loft? Was it the endlessly optimistic Jess, the sarcastic but lovable Nick, or maybe the unpredictable Winston? Let me know in the comments, because one of their real-life stories is far more shocking than anything the show ever dared to write. When New Girl first premiered in 2011, no one expected it to become such a defining sitcom of its era. It wasn't just funny, it was different. It had a kind of charm that felt messy, awkward, and completely human. The show captured that strange period of life where nothing is certain. Careers are unstable, relationships are confusing, and somehow, the people around you become your anchor. Jess, Nick, Schmidt, Winston, and Cece didn't feel like scripted characters. They felt like friends, like people we had known for years. We laughed with them, grew with them, and in some ways, saw ourselves in them. But while the loft was filled with laughter and chaos on screen, behind the scenes, the actors were living very different realities. Each of them carried their own ambitions, their own pressures, and their own personal battles. Some were chasing success, some were trying to hold on to it, and some were still figuring out who they really were, long after the cameras stopped rolling. Hannah Simone's journey feels almost like the calm before the storm in a world where chaos often defines success.
Long before she became Cece Pedrad, she had already lived a life shaped by movement and cultural diversity. Born in London, raised across multiple countries including Saudi Arabia, India, and Canada, her identity was never tied to just one place. That global upbringing gave her a quiet confidence, but it also meant constantly adapting, constantly starting over. Before acting, she built a successful career in modeling and worked as a television host, slowly carving her place in the entertainment world. When New Girl came along, it didn't explode her life overnight. It simply elevated a path she had been steadily building for years. Unlike many of her co-stars, Hannah largely avoided controversy. She kept her personal life private, grounded, and away from the spotlight. After the show ended, she transitioned smoothly into voice acting and other creative roles, proving that not every Hollywood story needs chaos to succeed. Sometimes, consistency is its own kind of victory. Lamorne Morris, on the other hand, represents a completely different kind of journey, the kind filled with uncertainty, doubt, and the constant fear that success might never come. Before New Girl, he was struggling. Auditions came and went, opportunities slipped through his fingers, and like many actors in Hollywood, he faced the harsh reality of being overlooked. There was a time when he seriously questioned whether he should keep going at all. The industry can be brutal, and for Lamorne, the breakthrough didn't come early. It came late. When he finally landed the role of Winston Bishop, everything changed, but not instantly. At first, even his character struggled to find direction on the show. Winston wasn't fully defined, much like Lamorne's own place in Hollywood at the time. But as the seasons progressed, something clicked. His comedic timing, his unpredictability, and his unique energy turned Winston into one of the most beloved characters in the series. After New Girl, Lamorne didn't fade away. Instead, he continued to grow, taking on more diverse roles
and proving that sometimes the slowest journeys lead to the most meaningful success. Max Greenfield's story is one of persistence in the face of rejection. For years, he was stuck in the cycle that so many actors know too well. Audition after audition, small roles that went unnoticed, and the constant feeling of being just one step away, but never quite there. Before Schmidt, Max struggled with typecasting. He was often seen as the nice guy or the background character, never the standout. And in Hollywood, that can feel like a dead end. There were moments when it seemed like the breakthrough might never happen. Then came New Girl, and everything shifted. Schmidt wasn't just a role, it was a revelation. Max brought a level of intensity, humor, and vulnerability that turned what could have been a one-dimensional character into something unforgettable. But even after success, new challenges emerged. Breaking out of such an iconic role isn't easy. Audiences see you as that character, and Hollywood often does too. Max had to work hard to redefine himself, to prove he could be more than Schmidt. And over time, through various roles in television and film, he managed to do exactly that. Jake Johnson's journey might be the most relatable of all, because it's rooted in struggle, doubt, and the fear of giving up just before everything changes. Before New Girl, Jake wasn't living the dream. He was barely getting by. Financial instability was a constant reality, and acting felt more like a gamble than a career. There were moments when he came dangerously close to walking away from it all. The uncertainty, the rejection, the lack of steady income, it all added up. For many people, that would have been the end of the story. But then, Nick Miller happened. The role didn't just bring him recognition, it gave him stability, a platform, and a voice. Jake's natural, effortless style made Nick feel real, in a way that few sitcom characters ever achieve. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't polished. And that's exactly why audiences connected with him so deeply. Even after finding success, Jake chose a different path than many expected. Instead of chasing only big-budget Hollywood roles, he balanced his career between indie films and mainstream projects. It wasn't about fame. It was about authenticity. And maybe that's what makes his story stand out the most. Because sometimes, success isn't about becoming the biggest star in the room. It's about finally finding a place where you belong. So far, which journey has surprised you the most? Was it the quiet strength behind Cece, the late rise of Winston, the persistence of Schmidt, or Nick's struggle to find his place? And here's something to think about. Do you feel their real lives truly reflect the characters they played on screen? Or are they completely different people behind the camera? Zooey Deschanel wasn't just another cast member when New Girl began. She was the center of it all. Long before she stepped into the role of Jess Day, Zooey had already built a name for herself in Hollywood. With films like 500 Days of Summer and a successful music career, she had become known for a very specific image: the quirky, charming, slightly offbeat girl that audiences adored. But that image became both her greatest strength and her biggest limitation. Taking on New Girl meant more than just starring in a sitcom. It meant carrying the weight of an entire show. Every episode, every storyline, every moment revolved around her. And with that came pressure. The expectation to deliver, to stay relevant, and to keep audiences engaged season after season. At the same time, her personal life was unfolding in the public eye. Relationships, marriage, and eventually divorce all became headlines. In an industry that rarely separates the person from the persona, Zooey found herself constantly being defined by that quirky girl label, even as she tried to grow beyond it. New Girl gave her stability and success, but it also locked her into an identity she would spend years trying to reshape. Damon Wayans Jr.'s story is one of opportunity, and difficult choices. Coming from the legendary Wayans family, expectations were already sky-high before he even stepped onto the set. Comedy was in his blood, but so was the pressure to live up to a legacy that had been built over decades. When New Girl first started, Damon was part of the original lineup as coach. But just as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. Another show, Happy Endings, had been renewed unexpectedly, forcing him to leave New Girl after the very first episodes. For many actors, that kind of situation could have been devastating. Walking away from a show that would go on to become a massive hit, not knowing if you made the right choice. But Damon's story didn't end there. Years later, he returned to New Girl, stepping back into the role of coach as if he had never left. It was a rare second chance in an industry that doesn't often give them, and he made the most of it, proving that timing, even when imperfect, can still lead to something meaningful. Megan Fox's journey might be one of the most surprising transformations connected to New Girl. By the time she joined the show as Reagan Lucas, she was already a global star, but also one of the most misunderstood figures in Hollywood. After her breakout success in Transformers, Megan quickly became a household name. But that rise came with intense scrutiny. Interviews, public comments, and industry conflicts led to a sudden and very public fallout. Almost overnight, her career seemed to stall. Hollywood can be unforgiving, and for a time, it felt like Megan had been pushed out.
So when she appeared on New Girl, it wasn't just a casting choice. It was a quiet comeback. Her character brought a different energy to the show, and audiences began to see a new side of her. Less controversy, more control. Less chaos, more confidence. It wasn't a loud return to the spotlight. It was something more subtle, and in many ways, more powerful. Nasim Pedrad's path was shaped by resilience in ways that often go unnoticed. Before New Girl, she had already made a name for herself on Saturday Night Live, a platform known for both launching careers and exhausting those who try to survive it. SNL is relentless. The pace, the pressure, the constant need to prove yourself week after week. It pushes even the most talented performers to their limits. For Nasim, it was both an opportunity and a challenge. As an Iranian-American actress, she also faced barriers that went beyond comedy. Representation in Hollywood has never been equal, and finding roles that weren't limited or stereotypical required persistence. Joining New Girl as Allie Nelson gave her a chance to show a different side of her talent. She wasn't just a sketch comedian anymore. She was part of a story, part of a world that allowed her character to grow. And through it all, she continued to push forward, quietly breaking barriers, one role at a time. But if there's one story that truly captures the weight of fame, expectation, and personal reinvention, it comes back to Zooey Deschanel. Because beyond the success, beyond the charm, there was a constant spotlight that never seemed to fade. Every relationship became public. Every decision was analyzed. And every attempt to evolve was compared to the image people had already decided she was. Being seen as the quirky girl might sound harmless, even flattering. But over time, it can become a cage. A version of yourself that the world refuses to let go of, even when you've already moved on. Her divorce brought even more attention, turning personal moments into public narratives. And in an industry that thrives on perception, breaking free from that narrative is one of the hardest things anyone can do. Yet, despite all of it, Zooey didn't disappear. She adapted. She shifted. She slowly redefined herself on her own terms. Because sometimes, the biggest challenge isn't becoming famous. It's figuring out who you are. when the whole world thinks they already know. Years have passed since New Girl first made us laugh, but somehow, that loft in Los Angeles still feels like a place we can return to, like a memory that never really fades. It wasn't just the jokes. It wasn't just the awkward silences or the ridiculous games. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of finding your people in a world that doesn't always make sense. Jess, Nick, Schmidt, Winston, and Cece weren't perfect. They were messy, confused, sometimes completely lost. And maybe that's exactly why we loved them. Because in their chaos, we saw our own. But behind every laugh, every strange moment, every heartfelt confession, there were real people. People who were growing, struggling, failing, and trying again, just like the characters they brought to life. Some of them found lasting success. Some had to fight harder than ever just to stay in the game. And some only discovered who they truly were long after the cameras stopped rolling. Time changed them, just like it changes all of us. Careers evolved, identities shifted, priorities became clearer. But the impact they left behind stayed exactly where it was. Because New Girl was never just a sitcom. It was comfort. It was connection. It was that strange, beautiful reminder that you don't have to have everything figured out to belong somewhere. And maybe that's why, even now, years later, it still means something. If this brought back memories for you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. And tell me, which New Girl story shocked you the most?